This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chad says it has killed hundreds of rebels amid concerns that insurgents were marching towards the capital N'Djamena. South Africa considering lifting the suspension of Johnson & Johnson COVID jabs. And Nigerian artist seeks to foster unity in the troubled Plateau state using his music hub. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. The details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Rama Nyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Tanzania's economy is forecast to grow by over 5% this year. We'll look at the forecasts. And the UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs is raising alarm about a looming debt crisis across the African continent. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. The government in Chad is reassuring its citizens and the international community that an insurgency in the north of the country is under control. The military claims to have killed around 300 rebels. The government says they were part of an armed group approaching the capital N'Djamena. The group Front for Change and Concord in Chad is believed to have trained in Libya. According to some reports, the group crossed into Chad on April the 11th. The United States is among the countries that have raised concern about security in Chad. It warned that rebel fighters appear to be moving towards the capital and ordered its non-essential staff to leave. But the national television station showed soldiers celebrating their victory, destroying vehicles in the desert and a large group of captured prisoners.
On April 17, 2021, at around 1500 hours local time, the Security and Defense Forces, with determination and courage, destroyed the column of terrorists who went on a clumsy adventure in the north of Kanem province. The column was totally decimated. The area is being searched to capture the last of the people running away.
Let's cross over now to Deji Badmus live for us in Lagos. Deji, Chad says it has all but neutralized the security threat posed by an armed group in the country's north. What do you know about this?
Well, Beatrice, what I can tell you is that despite the images that the Chadian government now has actually shown on national TV there, not everyone is convinced, and there's a reason for it. The part of the reason is because what the Chadian government is saying is quite in contrast to what some of the foreign governments have said. For instance, we know that the U.S. embassy there has asked some of its staff to leave the country, same thing as the UK embassy there. And the information from them is that these rebels are on their way to N'Djamena, but of course the Chadian government said it intercepted them at that town, Kanem. There's been no independent confirmation yet at all from independent sources now. And of course the spokesperson of the rebel group has also issued a statement saying they're actually on their way and that nothing will stop them. So there's still concern, and people, especially the people of the capital now, are hoping that they're going to get more reassurance now from the government that this is not going to happen. They are particularly concerned that what they are getting from the foreign governments, I'm talking about the embassies, the US embassy and the UK embassy, is in direct contrast to what their government is actually telling them.
So, Deji, just how critical is Chad's role in helping to contain terror threats in West Africa and the Sahel region as a whole?
I'll tell you something, Beatrice. Look, without Chad, the G5 Sahel force, for instance, would have been dead and buried a long time ago. We know that that force is not as effective as everybody wants it to be, but Chad is the strongest force in that region, and Chad is actually the reason why that force is even still in place as we speak. Without the support of Chad as well, Boko Haram would probably have caused more havoc than it is causing in parts of Nigeria, the northeast especially. So Chad, everybody knows Chad is a very strong force, and that's why everyone is concerned in the region that should there be an uprising in Chad, it definitely would not be good, not just for Chad now, but for the entire region. Chad is very, very crucial in the Sahel's region's fight now against terrorism in that region. We know the cooperation between the Chadian government and the American government on one hand. Operation Barkhane has its headquarters in Chad. So it's very, very crucial in that fight. And honestly, without the support of Chad, it's difficult to see how the region would be able to deal with the activities of jihadists in that region, especially in the Sahel.
It does look like Chad needs quite a lot of support, Deji, from what you're saying. So what can neighboring countries like Nigeria do, though, to help stabilize Chad instead of relying on interventions from France, for instance?
Well, first of all, I think it would be difficult at this moment to say that Nigeria would, send boots on the ground in Chad. I don't think that will happen. But let's not also forget that you still have the multinational joint task force. This multinational joint task force has been fighting Boko Haram for quite a while now. Chad is a very integral part of that multinational joint task force. And as a matter of fact, the headquarters of the MNJTF is in N'Djamena. So it'll be interesting to see how, for instance, the MNJTF responds if, for instance, the rebels keep to their words that they were going to march on N'Djamena. We just have to wait and see. But I think at this point, what Nigeria can probably do is to try and broker peace, try to get the rebels to sit down with the government and seek an amicable resolution now to this potential crisis. Beatrice?
All right, Deji Banmos joining us there from Lagos. Now, despite sustained pressure from international and local actors, Africa is witnessing a growing threat from extremist groups. CGTN's Robert Nagila takes a look at some of the main extremist groups operating on the continent.
Attacks by extremist groups across Africa have risen sharply in the past decade. In East Africa, Al-Shabaab mainly operates within Somalia, but has launched attacks in neighboring Kenya. Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb operates in North Africa. It also operates in West Africa through affiliate Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin. In the Sahel region, Lake Chad Basin and Nigeria, Islamic State-affiliated networks including Boko Haram are active. While further south in Mozambique, Islamist group Al-Sunnah wa Jama'ah has destabilized the northern part of the country, displacing hundreds of thousands of civilians. To counter these threats, a coordination center in Senegal under the Partner Armies in West Africa initiative is being established to strengthen partnerships between foreign and local forces. France has deployed 5,100 troops in West Africa's Sahel region. The United States, meanwhile, has over 5,000 troops on the continent. 4,300 are based in East Africa, where the U.S. maintains a military base in Djibouti. Now, under an African Union mission, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Burundi, and Djibouti have deployed troops to Somalia. Apart from actively engaging in combat with extremist groups, the U.S. and French militaries are involved in training troops of partner states and intelligence sharing.
South Africa's suspension of the use of the COVID-19 Johnson & Johnson vaccine may soon be lifted. The rollout of the vaccine in a local study on health workers was temporarily paused after rare clotting was found in 6 U.S. patients. South Africa has, however, not recorded any cases. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
South Africa is eager to get its Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine study back on track after it was temporarily halted over fears of clotting. The health regulatory has recommended that the Sisonke trial be allowed to continue with strict conditions.
The vaccine-induced thrombocytopenia and thrombosis is an idiosyncratic reaction. It's an immune-based reaction that is we cannot predict who gets it. Up until now, the cases worldwide have been in the age range of 18 to 48. And so, in fact, we are going to go ahead. We haven't seen a case of the so-called VITT or VIT, in South Africa.
The benefits outweigh from Johnson & Johnson the current risks. And there was only one person that died in USA with this platelet problem. Remember, it's not the same than one would normally expect if you get clots. So this is a different mechanism that's being used. It's a very extremely rare condition.
Most recipients who have received the jab are women with an average age of 40. Just under 150 people have reported severe side effects, but none for clotting. Doctors are being asked to be vigilant as the possibility cannot be ruled out.
The VITT presentation is with severe, unrelenting headache or severe chest pain, unrelenting, and severe abdominal pain that is continuous and unrelenting. Those are because these are clots occurring in major venous systems in the head or in the abdomen, and this is not a mild presentation. People will want to go to hospital, and the clinicians need to be aware.
Recipients will also be updated accordingly before taking the jab.
And the informed consent forms will go through specifically all of the new information, so people are required to read that. This is a study, so that it is important for them to do before they sign off. Most of the information will then be done again at the vaccination site, just to make sure that people do understand all of the information so that they're making an informed decision before they get their vaccine.
A decision on how soon vaccinations will resume is expected in the next coming days. 200,000 vaccines still have to be administered before a second phase mass rollout begins in mid-May. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Now, many countries in Africa are relying on supplies of COVID-19 vaccines that are manufactured in India. But India is facing a huge surge of infections and has consequently halted the export of the jabs. We earlier discussed this issue with CGTN's New Delhi correspondent Ravinda Boao. Here is what she had to say.
Well, at the moment, the situation is difficult in the sense India is lagging behind in the domestic vaccination program, and that's why they have kind of put a stop or a ban to sending or exporting vaccination doses to any other countries. After donating tens and millions or gifting them or selling them, India decided to concentrate on the domestic demand, and that is why they are putting a lot of pressure on the manufacturer as well as to look at the Indian demand first before actually exporting it. So it looks like it's going to take a while before these countries who are dependent on India in terms of jabs will probably have to wait. Looking at the situation, the manufacturers have asked the central government to give them some money in order to ramp up manufacturing, but at the moment no signal from the central government in terms of giving them that financial assistance. So if they do not get this financial assistance immediately, they cannot actually put in more money in terms of ramping up the infrastructure to create more vaccine doses. So for the countries who are dependent on Indian manufacturer, of course it is bad news in the sense it's going to take a bit of more time, and also the central government has put a ban on this. So it only has to now come from an international community. When the pressure will come, probably India will be able to send some vaccines, but definitely as of now, looking at the situation in India, I don't think the government is anyway willing to let go of the vaccine and to export it.
Meanwhile, India's capital city of Delhi goes into lockdown from Monday night. The UK has now added India to its list of countries from which travel to the UK is banned. Daily cases have been in the triple digits for nearly 2 weeks. Delhi joins cities in around 13 states that have imposed restrictions, including India's financial center of Mumbai. Our reporter Gauzan has more from there.
I'm currently north of India's financial capital, Mumbai. Although many people here always say that Mumbai never stops, the city has been in slow motion for the past few days since restrictions were imposed on April the 14th, or what they call the Janta curfew. As far as I can tell, the streets and markets here are clearly less crowded. People are only allowed to go out for essential activities, and only essential businesses are allowed to operate during the Janta curfew, which may last till 1st of May. However, some parts of the city have become busier, such as train stations. Railway authorities say as many as 350,000 migrant workers has returned to their hometown from Mumbai in the last 2 weeks, fearing the risk of losing jobs. Hospitals are under pressure with reports of shortage of hospital beds and oxygen. Some patients even have to share beds and oxygen when available. Despite being the largest vaccine producer in the world, India is also facing vaccine shortages. Several vaccination centers in Mumbai say they have had to turn people away because of the lack of supplies. This may affect the Indians' vaccination campaign and its effort to control the pandemic, as Mumbai remains to be the country's one of the worst hit cities. Gao Zhen, CGTN, Mumbai.
Madagascar, like many countries around the world, is dealing with a second wave of COVID-19 infections. The island nation has recorded over 31,000 coronavirus cases. The surge in infections has put a strain on the country's health system. Ashta Tal has more.
Madagascar is battling a second wave of COVID-19 infections. With hospitals reaching capacity, hotels and schools have been adapted to deal with the overflow.
We have the virus, which is the South African variant, and this second wave also. This virus also has a particularity. It triggers more severe forms, hence the increase of death in Madagascar currently.
In addition to a lack of space, some caretakers say they're struggling to access necessary medication.
So far, medicines are free. Except when they're out of stock, you have to buy them elsewhere. Medicines are free when they still have stocks available.
The country's president, Andrei Rajoelina, initially expressed hesitancy towards the use of COVID-19 vaccines. He instead urged citizens to use herbal remedies. The government has now changed its policy and course of action.
We had discussions, exchanges with Malagasy scientists, and then we decided to go for vaccination. This is another way to protect the population. And on this subject, we are currently working on the COVAX initiative.
While the government has now joined the WHO-led COVAX initiative, it continues to push the use of its herbal remedy. Ashta Tal, CGTN.
The second China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo is set for September in the central Chinese city of Changsha. Major agricultural exports from Africa, such as cashew and coffee, are among the local products to be showcased at the event. The forum will also be part of the efforts to boost economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. The Tanzanian ambassador to China told CGTN that China and Africa are right to join hands in tackling the crisis.
The global crisis can only be overcome by cooperation. No country can fight this alone, and China has shown leadership, but also African continent has played along very well. As you know, China and Africa had a Solidarity Summit to deal with this COVID-19, but also China, as a member of the G20, has played a significant role to address the challenges that comes with COVID-19. You know, to many of us, especially in Africa, COVID-19 impact is not more to do with health, it's more to do with the economy. It had to be a global effort to address the challenges, and we are very grateful that China has taken lead into this. And we count on more on China to provide more support to our countries to face the challenges of COVID-19.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. We update you on efforts to contain a bushfire that has already destroyed key buildings at the University of Cape Town. And the impact of the coronavirus pandemic in a resort town along Egypt's border with Israel.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Cape Verde's ruling party is set to maintain its majority in parliament. This follows Sunday's parliamentary elections. The ruling party has so far secured 36 out of 72 seats, with 3 seats still remaining undetermined. The main opposition leader, Janira Hopfa Almada, had hoped to become the country's first female prime minister, but her party's loss ruled that out. The opposition had led a campaign criticizing the ruling party's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government had closed borders to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Without tourists flocking to the island, Cape Verde's economy was hard hit. To South Africa now, where a mountain fire continues to cause widespread destruction in Cape Town. The blaze that began on Sunday on the slopes of the Table Mountain has destroyed property, including a historical monument. The University of Cape Town has also been badly affected after one of its libraries was gutted. CGTN's Travers Andrews filed this report.
It's one of the worst fires that Cape Town City has faced in recent years, leaving many victims counting losses. The fire engulfed part of Table Mountain before quickly getting out of control. Firefighters have been battling to contain the blaze, while helicopters conducted aerial water bombing to stop the flames from spreading further. Strong gale force winds have, however, fanned the spread of the fire.
The fire started on Philip Khosana Drive, moving up in the mountain. Wind blew it over to Rhodes Memorial, where much of the restaurant was then damaged or gutted. It managed to jump the M5 because it was spotting all over the place, and destroyed Mostert Mill, the oldest mill in South Africa, and some of the thatch roof buildings beneath it, which is very tragic. These are probably irrecoverable assets.
The University of Cape Town evacuated all students living on campus after its Jagger library went up in flames. The institution also lost priceless printed and audio-visual materials from its African Studies program housed in the library. While no lives have been lost, 4 firefighters have been admitted to hospital for fire-related injuries.
And of course the smoke is extremely thick. About 150 firefighters on the scene from the city alone now, plus working on fire, volunteer wildfire services and Sandpark staff. So quite an extensive range of people. The city has about 26 vehicles and 6 divisions working on this fire, and it's a long haul.
Cape Townians have been sending donations of food and water to the central fire station. Thick smoke can be seen billowing across the city, and many surrounding roads remain closed. Now, firefighters have evacuated a number of neighborhoods on the slopes of Table Mountain out of an abundance of caution. A number of residents had to flee their homes to escape the danger posed by the blaze. While an investigation to establish the cause of the fire is underway, one person has been arrested in what is now a suspected case of arson. Travers Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
A remote yet idyllic resort town on Egypt's border with Israel has been economically devastated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Located too far for most domestic travelers to enjoy, Taba relies almost entirely on tourists coming through Israel. But for over a year now, border closures have kept tourists away. Here is Adel Makhroui with more.
It's a city with magnificent nature, unique location, and cultural heritage. Yet Taba has been suffering a lot under the COVID-19 pandemic. The borders are shut, and it's quite far for Egyptians to come here for pleasure. The Taba crossing is a gateway between Egypt and Israel. It's also the borderline for this remote resort city, feeding it with tens of thousands of tourists every year. But fears of cross-border viral infection has locked the passage for over a year.
On the 18th of March, when the lockdown began in Egypt, Taba became deserted. By June, we decided to follow government health regulations, which are an additional cost to any hotel. Yet, when we reopened, the occupancy rates were 0% in 1 month, 1% in the other, and 5% at best. No crisis before the pandemic has hit us that hard.
Yet every day,
Makhlouf is the first to wake up among his staff members. He tours every corner of the hotel, inspecting the cleanliness of rooms, halls, restaurants, and makes sure everything is running in order. Many hotels like this one are draining resources in attempts to survive the COVID-19 pandemic.
We kept our labor. We are paying salaries. We decided to renovate the hotel's interior design. We are living in the hope of the possible resumption of touristic activities. Shutting down the hotel costs money. If we shut for a month or two, water pipes will need maintenance. Some equipment could need replacement.
Of all cities in the Sinai, Taba is the farthest away. It's a 12-hour bus ride from Cairo. So for most domestic travelers, it's not worth it to come here for a short weekend.
Taba relies on two neighboring countries and the border crossing. We are the #1 hotel in Taba when it comes to online bookings. The border passage brings to us tourists from all over the world who are primarily visiting the other countries. They all love Sinai.
In 2020, Egypt's tourist revenues dropped by nearly 70% from the year before, bringing the country $4 billion. Q1 this year is reporting 30 to 40% fewer tourists. Luckily for the tiny city of 1 square kilometer, the border is gradually opening up in April. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Taba, Egypt.
Sudan's Dinda National Park is one of the largest wildlife sanctuaries in the country, but people have in recent years been encroaching into the park in search of new land to grow crop. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports on efforts being made to mitigate this human-wildlife conflict.
Sudan's Dinda National lies adjacent to Ethiopia's Al-Atash National Park. The park is home to thousands of animal species which boast the country's most diverse wildlife. Freshwater lakes also surround the park's woodlands and savanna, making it an important flyway for migratory birds as well. But wildlife rangers are battling a looming crisis. Human encroachment in the park threatens to diminish the wilderness.
In the recent period, the park has been exploited through aggressive cultivation, logging and hunting. These are all threats to the reserve, which is considered the largest reserve in northern Sudan, and has also become the last refuge for wild animals in northern Sudan.
In recent decades, the increased population in the villages neighboring the park has created a huge pressure for new land to grow crops. Cattle herders' traditional grazing lands have been plowed up, leading to the increase in encroachment on the park in search of pasture. The park management says such behaviors are posing an immense threat to the reserve.
There are programs set up by organizations directed to local communities through which they were given fruits from the reserve and have had their quality of life improved and were provided with cooking gas. However, their existence inside the reserve is disturbing.
Human encroachment disturbs the park's wildlife in other ways too. Hungry villagers often harvest wild honey from the park's woods, lighting fires to create smoke to ward off the bees, thus breaching the park rules. Rangers patrol the rugged terrain in search of violators, who can face hefty fines or up to 6 months in prison, depending on the offense. But despite all the challenges, the reserve has remained pristine and managed to maintain its wilderness. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
NASA made space history on Monday with the successful liftoff of the first powered controlled flight by an aircraft on another planet. Images of the Ingenuity helicopter flying over Mars' surface, its 2 rotors turning in opposite directions and at much faster speeds than a helicopter on Earth. This is due to the Martian atmosphere, which is only 1% of Earth's density. The milestone achieved by the Ingenuity helicopter was likened by NASA to the Wright brothers' first controlled flight of their motor-driven airplane near Kitty Hawk in North Carolina in December of 1903. NASA said the successful test could pave the way for new modes of exploration on the planet and other destinations in the solar system, from Venus to Saturn's moon Titan. Let's now take a quick look at our top headlines this hour. The government in Chad is reassuring its citizens and the international community that an insurgency in the north of the country is under control. The military claims to have killed around 300 rebels. The government says they were part of an armed group approaching the capital in N'Djamena. South Africa's suspension of the use of the COVID-19 Johnson & Johnson vaccine may soon be lifted. The rollout of the vaccine, which is part of a local study on health workers, was temporarily paused and rare clotting was found in 6 U.S. patients. South Africa has, however, not recorded any cases. And Cape Verde's ruling party is set to maintain its majority in parliament. This follows Sunday's parliamentary elections. The ruling party has secured 36 out of 72 seats, with 3 seats still remaining undetermined. The main opposition leader, Janira Hopfa Almada, had hoped to become the country's first female prime minister, but her party's loss has now ruled that out. And that's a look at your headlines. Let's now go to Rama Nyang for a look at business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Tanzania's economy is forecast to grow by over 5% in 2021. We'll look at the data. And the UN's Department for Economic and Social Affairs is raising alarm about a looming debt crisis in Africa.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in East Africa. Tanzania's economy is forecast to grow by nearly 6% this year, fueled primarily by sustained public spending and the normalization of global trade and investments, as according to forecasts from the country's central bank. It says that economic growth over the past year was generally satisfactory compared to regional peers, despite the global effects of the pandemic on economies around the world. Here's Isaac Lucando with the details.
Tanzania's central bank's confidence in the country's economy remains unwavering despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. A 5.7% growth prediction comes on the back of what it says are government financial operations that are broadly on track, a satisfactory revenue performance, and the country's manageable debt. This economist believes that the country should spend its financial resources on key sectors to achieve its goal.
For a country to grow, you need to select very few sectors that you think you have a very competitive edge compared to your neighbors or peers. Then you put a lot of money into that, meaning investing a lot of money into that. Then that is the only way you can assure yourself of such growth.
Tanzania's economy grew by 4.7% in the first 3 quarters of 2020, driven by construction, agriculture, transport, and mining. The country's president believes creating a good investment climate is key to reaching this year's growth targets.
Investors have branded us as unpredictable. You tell someone to come to Tanzania and they say those people are unpredictable. They tell you to invest. Once you do so, they will come with all these other things. So I kindly ask and I direct you to work on this and fix it.
In June of last year, the Bank of Tanzania predicted Tanzania's economy would grow 5.5% in 2021. Earlier this year, the World Bank agreed with the prediction, raising its forecast to 5.5%, up from its earlier estimate of 2.5% for last year. The Tanzanian Central Bank's optimistic economic growth forecast comes on the back of a dire warning from the International Monetary Fund. The fund warns that sub-Saharan Africa is set to record the world's slowest regional economic growth at 3.4%, as it struggles to recover from a coronavirus-triggered slump. Meanwhile, Tanzania has set for itself ambitious tax collection targets of around $860 million, up from an average of $560 million a month. Improving how taxes are collected could prove vital in reaching the country's growth targets.
The President spoke about the taxes, the tax authority, that is TRA, and the Vice President spoke about the same, and the Minister in charge of Finance spoke about the very same people on how to improve their hostile tax collecting tactics. But I can see a growth of more than 5.7 if and only if whatever that they're saying is put in writing, meaning it has to be enacted.
The World Bank warns that Tanzania's economic success is still dependent on the worldwide rollout of coronavirus vaccines. With a COVID-19 committee now in place, how Tanzania handles COVID-19 going forward may be equally crucial to the country reaching its economic goals. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Also, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs has joined global bodies in raising the alarm over a looming debt crisis on the continent, compounded, of course, by the damage inflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic. South Africa has been struggling to grow its economy for years. Debt to GDP ratios over there, well over 80% and still climbing. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu taking up the story.
The South African economy is expected to grow around 3% this year. This growth would be coming off a low base. Growth in South Africa has been declining for years, while debt has been escalating.
Is important is that South Africa should in fact have a strategy for growth. We should continue to borrow, but ensure that we have a strategy for growth. At 87%, at 90%, it's healthy for South Africa to have that debt ratio for as long as our economy continues to grow.
The IMF's Financing for Sustainable Development Report 2021 found that a third of emerging market economies are assessed to be at high risk of fiscal crisis.
We know that in more than half of developing countries, debt service takes more than 25% of their tax revenue. And this is the figure from last year. And in many of those, the figure is more than 40% of tax revenue that is going into debt service payments.
The IMF's decision to unlock member countries' special drawing rights could be an opportunity for South Africa to solve its debt burden.
You can use that money for whatever purpose you want, but also you can swap. For example, we went to the IMF to borrow this about $4.something billion, and we have almost the same amount in SDR. We can therefore swap that money, pay them using the SDR that we have there, and have no debt.
Major infrastructure projects are in the pipeline to boost economic activity and create jobs for the unemployed as the country embarks on its post-COVID-19 recovery.
South Africa's way of investing in infrastructure is through PPPs, borrowing money from the private sector or internationally. But again, those are the places where money is borrowed at very expensive rates. It's unlikely to derail our growth capacity. But what that does is that all the money that you borrow from outside, you have to pay. So there's a leakage out of the economy. So instead of boosting the economy, you're actually flatlining it.
South Africa's woes have been worsened by COVID. The country already has one of the highest rates of poverty and inequality in the world. Research by PwC suggests it could take up to 5 years before the economy gets back to pre-lockdown levels. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Out of the continent now, it's day 2 of the Boao Forum for Asia in southern China's Hainan province. China's head of state Xi Jinping will deliver a keynote address on Tuesday via video link. The theme of the 4-day annual event is A World in Change, joining hands to strengthen global governance and advance the Belt and Road Initiative. Today's event started with a dialogue on the topic of globalization in a post-pandemic era. The agenda mainly focuses on the near future of medical ecology and the world's economic recovery. The Boao Forum is the world's first major international event on the conference circuit to be held offline this year. Over 4,000 participants are in the coastal town. Now, the world's biggest free trade deal, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the RCEP as it's more commonly known, was signed last year. Members include the 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, plus Australia, China, Japan, New Zealand and South Korea. Essentially, those member states cover roughly 30% of global GDP and population. A special session at the Boao Forum for Asia tackled the impact of this deal. Here's Yang Chengxi with more.
A hot topic for this year's Boao Forum for Asia, the world's biggest trade deal. Experts say the RCEP could greatly reduce tariffs among its members by as much as 90% over the next 20 years.
Previous trade tensions and COVID-19 pandemic have destabilized global industry chains and supply chains. Many countries have started to wonder where globalization would go next. In this difficult time, 15 countries in Asia signed the RCEP. It is a very important event.
It's not only traditional trade that's benefited. A chapter of the agreement outlined e-commerce specifically, including regulations, the facilitation of paperless trade, e-authentication, and e-signatures. More digital business means great opportunities for companies like Chin Data Group, which has an overseas headquarters in Singapore.
Our most important market is Malaysia. We believe the Asia-Pacific region presents great opportunities for us. Our data center in Malaysia helps our Chinese clients do e-commerce. Our project in preparation in Thailand is also for e-commerce. The RCEP gives Chinese businesses the chance to go overseas. On the other hand, it gives our overseas clients an opportunity to explore data sharing under the new policy framework.
The agreement is still being ratified. China, Thailand, and Singapore have already done so. It's expected to come into effect next year, creating new opportunities for businesses. Current trade between China and other RCEP members already accounts for about 1/3 of China's total foreign trade volume. Experts say the agreement is expected to help member economies recover from the blow of COVID-19 and furthermore, take a symbolic stand against global protectionism. Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Boao, Hainan Province.
And I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though. In global business, we'll be heading up north to Egypt. The country's president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, has ordered a probe into a recurring wave of train accidents. 3 of them, in fact, in the last 4 weeks. So what exactly is going on with Egyptian railways and why are all these accidents happening? We'll explore that live from Cairo at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. A Nigerian artist seeks to foster unity in the troubled Plateau state using his music hub.
Mimi sijapiga nyongolo wase pale kuna wase wengi. Ninachezanga na dada yangu juu pia mimi sipendi kukufa. Ilikuwa ni asili yangu ndo pia familia yangu pia iweze kukula. Kwa hivyo mimi nacheza na rada yangu, akili yangu na macho yangu.
Kibira yenyewe ilikuwa mbaya kitambo, kulikuwa na wezi wengi sana. Na siku hizi yenyewe hata unaweza kaa bila kusikia hata mwizi ameshikwa mahali ama amechomwa ama amefanywa nini. Ndio naona yenyewe Kibira raundime si kama kitambo.
It's known without books. It's not easy to make it. To me, as an artist, I believe we only need a tool to bring change. And this tool to me, it can be educational background, it can be a skill, it can be a hobby of what you love.
I wanted to tap into that talent because if you don't nurture the talent while it is young, it gets lost. So I wanted to use my expertise in the media to nurture that talent, to mold them to become the future journalists.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
A Nigerian man is using his music hub to promote peace and unity in the country's north-central city of Jos. He says he is on a mission to encourage citizens to partner in building an undivided city despite the series of crises that have affected the state for 2 decades. Our correspondent Tessem Akende reports.
It's another day at this music hub owned by 37-year-old Mermu Pool. Different genres of music are produced from here. Pool subsidizes the studio recording session fees, with artists committing to messages of peace as their main theme. He says his kind of music is inspired by the crisis in Jos.
The primary purpose of putting this outfit or platform together is to promote peace. By bringing various artists together to make music and other forms of entertainment, preaching peace specifically, we believe the message will spread faster and God willing, the state will be healed.
Jos City has witnessed a series of outbreaks of ethnic violence and religious extremism in the last 20 years. And efforts by the government to bring about lasting peace has not been very successful. Human Rights Watch reports that hundreds of people were killed and thousands displaced since 2001. Mermopo believes the music that comes from this hub can capture the emotions of listeners. He hopes to promote peace and peaceful coexistence in society, as well as help revive the city of Jos. And his efforts are beginning to draw lots of music artists to join the cause.
People who come to record here are usually of different faiths and backgrounds and denominations. That alone is commendable. I believe that the days of crisis in Jos have come and gone for good.
The artists also target radio stations and online platforms to air their music and reach a wider audience. And some residents attest that music has played a huge role in the recent peace-building process witnessed in the state.
Music has been instrumental to the relative peace we are now enjoying in Jos. We are experiencing a rebirth, and I believe it can only get better.
The state government has urged traditional and religious leaders to sensitize their followers on the need to shun violence and live peacefully. In the meantime, artists like Pool will continue to play their parts in complementing the government's efforts. Tessem Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
Let's now take a quick look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. The Uganda national football team parts ways with coach Jonathan McKinstry.